Chairperson of the African Union, represented by Her Excellency Aisha Abduli, honored fellow bringers of messages of solidarity, First President of the Pan-African Parliament, ambassadors, excellencies, sisters and brothers. On behalf of religious communities, our South African church, that is the Anglican Church, I really want to welcome you here to Midrand, close to Alexander Township, the poor, run-down apartheid ghetto in which I grew up. I am particularly pleased to bring you a message of solidarity during the 2015, the year of women empowerment and development towards Africa's Agenda 2063. We in the churches and religious communities, both in this country and region, and across the continent, are not able to address you from a position of superiority when it comes to the empowerment of women. In my own church, I'm proud to say that we in Southern Africa have elected the first 2 women bishops in Africa. One in deeply conservative society of Swaziland. But while we say that women form the backbone of our church, we still have to overcome many challenges before we can say they are empowered. You have only to ask women themselves, and you will hear the problems they face within the church. To take just 2 examples, women in the church, just as in wider society, are victims of domestic abuse, often at the hands of men who sit beside them in the pews. And secondly, their role in congregational leadership is often not adequately recognized. But notwithstanding our weaknesses, as religious leaders on the continent, we have a duty to speak up for the marginalized and the victims of discrimination and violence. I read in the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa, particularly Article 3, that women have a right to dignity. Article 3 read that every woman shall have the right to dignity inherent in a human being and to the recognition and protection of her human and legal rights. And that every woman shall have the right to respect as a person and to the free development of her personality, close quote. The question I want to ask is just how far away from exercising those rights are women in our various situations, in our continent, and in our churches? Let me just give a brief, broad view of what I mean by that question through a series of questions. In this country in which we made South Africa, how can we say that women are treated with the dignity they deserve when those who are migrants from other countries are chased out of the communities in which they live peacefully and are forced to take care of their families in tents in a field? In northern Nigeria, how can we say that women are treated with the dignity they deserve when they are abducted and subjected to enslavement and rape by members of militia who besmirch the name of the faith they claim to follow, a faith which in reality is characterized by compassion and respect for people's dignity. Of course, dear friends, this Africa Day, the picture is not all gloomy. And I don't want to try to speak for women in identifying developments that may be positive for them. I hope during this session that they will speak for themselves, both to the hurdles they face and the achievement they are making in seeking their own empowerment. And so let me broaden my focus in highlighting what it is that we can celebrate and what it is that we can repent of and grieve over this Africa Day. And again, in broad strokes, in West Africa, we have been excited to see that Liberia has now been declared Ebola-free. We have also been thrilled at the success of the elections in Nigeria, where power is being transferred peacefully in what are being described as the most successful elections in the country's history. In Mali and Central African Republic, we must welcome the steps which leaders are making towards peace, and especially for the release by militia of child soldiers. But we must also pray for the strengthening of the peace process in those countries. In East Africa, we mourn the victims of extremist attacks in Kenya and Somalia and deplore the short-sightedness of leaders of South Sudan in pursuing their futile and destructive political wrangling at the cost of their people's lives. And in Burundi, we weep at the way in which Nelson Mandela's legacy as the broker of the Arusha peace agreement of 2000 is being squandered by leaders whose actions may well return the country to civil war. Across Africa as a whole, dear friends, we welcome the growing acceptance of the positive narrative which says Africa is rising. But we have to work to ensure that the benefits of growing economies in many parts are shared among all. Just before I conclude, elsewhere in South Africa, I have called for the new struggle. And the new struggle is nothing else but a plea for a framework to be created where we could encourage people to be courageous in dealing with some of these challenges that I've been raising, a framework or a movement where people could ensure that everyone is equal and that we speak as a collective and do away with the me attitude that is prevalent in the country as opposed to a we attitude. And in that spirit, let me end also on a hopeful note. Former President Mbeki, in this very parliament, presented us with a report showing how we can raise billions of dollars a year for developing our continent and her peoples by ending illicit financial flows out of Africa. Let us seize opportunities presented by such initiatives and commit ourselves not to enriching ourselves, but to using the money we raise for development of all, and especially for the poor. So happy Africa Day. I thank you.
That's Thabo Makgoba, Archbishop of Cape Town. Let's now cross live to Midrand, where the Pan-African Parliament is sitting.
Fellow Africans, we also mark this day with several blemishes. These include the region and ongoing conflicts that could continue to bedevil our beloved continent, as is the case at the moment in Burundi, in the Central African Republic, in Somalia, in South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as in our other member states. Your Excellencies, I'm just coming from Uganda only 2 days ago to see the refugees in Uganda. Uganda is doing a beautiful thing. Instead of putting them in camps, it's keeping the refugees in settlements, giving them land, not only enough for them to construct houses, but also enough for them to farm and do other livelihood activities. While I was in Kiryandongo, I was deeply touched at the reception center where I saw refugees still trooping from South Sudan. Women, children, some pregnant, some nursing babies, some women had given birth on their long, tortuous journey, mostly on foot. Refugees are also arriving from Burundi, from the conflict. Can Uganda continue with this magnanimity? Can Uganda continue to absorb the refugees from all over the continent? When are we going to stop fighting? Fellow Africans, the recent xenophobic attacks in the coastal city of Durban and in the economic hub of Johannesburg is also one of such blemishes. We take this opportunity to reiterate our condemnation of the unacceptable acts of violence that affected our brothers and sisters. No matter what the circumstance, such actions cannot be justified. No matter the frustrations, the loss of even a single life cannot be condoned. We also wish to applaud the swift action taken by the South African government and its citizenry in response to these acts of violence, which also resulted in the loss of lives and also of livelihoods. It has been said that one of the major causes of such incidents, as witnessed in South Africa and elsewhere, are the challenges posed by poverty and inequality. These are often characterized by the poor fighting the poor over limited and sometimes scarce resources. These incidents also underscore the urgent need for all of us to give urgent attention to issues related to migration and human trafficking. I would stop here to quote one of our ministers from the continent who said to me, he said, Aisha, 50, 100 years ago, people come from Europe and beyond to buy slaves from the African continent. Now it has changed. What we are seeing is voluntary slavery. Africans on their own volition voluntarily risk their lives across the Mediterranean to go and be slaves in Europe and other parts of the world. We must reverse this unfortunate trend. We must address the very circumstances that lead our nationals to leave our shores for better opportunities in other parts of the continent and the world. To this effect, I take this opportunity to also extend our heartfelt condolences to the families of the over 800 African brothers and sisters who recently lost their lives on the north coast of our continent. That incident is another painful reminder that we must urgently deal with the growth and integration of our continent. Never and never again must such acts and incidents be witnessed on our continent. Distinguished parliamentarians, in our quest for an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena, the role of our democratic institutions must also be emphasized. The 7 aspirations of the agenda can only be achieved through the continued commitment and effectiveness of our various arms of government, including the legislature, as representatives of our people. With enormous power of representation, lawmaking, appropriation, and oversight, distinguished parliamentarians, you have a central role in ensuring the ratification, domestication, and implementation of our shared values agenda of the African Union. The commitments embodied by this agenda provide the minimum standards of norms, values, and practices that will accelerate the eradication of our protracted challenges. We must do this by building strong institutions that will help propel the achievement of our aspirations. In this vein, let me advocate and call on our African member states to ratify the new enhanced protocol of the Pan-African Parliament aimed at vesting legislative powers on the Parliament. Through this enhanced protocol, the Pan-African Parliament will be able to assist member states in the process of domestication of our own various shared values instruments through the development of model laws that can be used by our various member states. We also note with pleasure the increasing gender parity at the Pan-African Parliament, especially as recommended by the Malabo Protocol. We also call on your excellencies, distinguished parliamentarians back home, to ensure that this gender parity is also emphasized in your various political parties. And also, we can also use you to enhance, when making constitutions, the possibility of women enjoying quotas. We need these quotas. We don't have to wait for 80 years to attain this gender parity. Your Excellencies, in realizing Africa's development, human development is not negotiable. The pockets of instability and conflict, which have sometimes resulted in loss of lives and livelihood, bear testament to this fact. We cannot afford to continue on a trajectory that excludes and also that is inequitable. In order to facilitate inclusive and sustainable growth, we must translate the Agenda 2063 into our national plans so that we can facilitate for priority areas such as integration, youth and women's development, job creation, energy and infrastructure development. In translating Agenda 2063, we'll need accelerated action towards an equitable growth path which prioritizes the people and connectivity. We must realize key urgent projects that connect us, including road, rail, aviation, marine transport, telecommunications, as well as industrialization and manufacturing. Our pursuit for accelerating our equitable economic growth path will also place greater pressure on our traditional and mainstream energy sectors. Consequently, we will begin to seriously implement key projects in the renewable energy sector, which include hydro and wind energy. In accelerating connectivity, we'll pay greater attention to the promotion of the continental free trade area. It is in seeking to accelerate implementation of this and other priorities and programs that will convene the Africa Economic Platform in the latter part of this year. The platform will pursue continental synergy and will bring together Africa's captains of industry, academics, governments, and activists. Only through working together can we facilitate for Africa's unity, shared prosperity, and lasting peace. I would also seize this opportunity to briefly assure Honorable Gertrude that the African Union Commission is not folding its arms and waiting for things to completely degenerate in Burundi. We have taken firm and bold decisions. We've made it categorically clear that the African Union Commission will not observe the elections on Burundi until the conditions for sustainable peace and development prevail. However, we have a team of mediators led by former Prime Minister of Togo, Prime Minister Edem Kojo, supported by Professor Ibrahim Afal, working night and day to ensure that there's sustainable peace and dialogue in the Republic of Burundi. Your Excellencies, at this juncture, I say to you once again, Happy Africa Day. Africa, one people, one destiny. Long live Africa and her diaspora. Long live African solidarity and unity. I thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Commissioner of Political Affairs. We would like now to recognize the presence of one of our former members who used to be the chair of the Women Caucus, who is now in the office of the Prime Minister in Uganda, Her Excellency Ataike Sarah Ndoboli. Now I would like to, before we proceed further, to call on the President of the Pan-African Parliament to perform some ceremony.
Thank you very much, Program Director. We have had opportunity to hear from the African Union, from the many women leaders on our continent who have strived to fight for women empowerment and for the well-being of Africa in general. But today, as always, history is written by those who are victorious, who are in charge, who are empowered. The history of independence struggle on our continent has only men in the forefront. But as a student of history in my country, Nigeria, I know that the first organized resistance to colonial rule was done in 1929 by the women of a commercial city called Aba in southeastern Nigeria, in Aba Women's Riot, where they opposed the taxation imposed on them by colonial powers. But the history of our struggle does not recognize those women. At the Pan-African Parliament, I have served here as Vice President for 4 years and 3 years as President. And during this period, we have had in this Parliament a great woman of Africa. Today we're only celebrating 52 years of Africa Day. But for over 60 years, this woman has consistently fought for the liberation of women, for the protection of children. Issues of maternal health, issues of infant mortality have been part of her crusade, not only in her native country, but across Africa. This woman has consistently been one loud voice in this Parliament to push us to do more practical things. She has organized within her limited resources to get support from our home government to do training of midwives in various African countries that do not have midwives in their villages. Practical input to the fight against infant mortality and maternal health care. This woman is over 80 years old, and at times I marvel how she's able to sit in sessions from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening, making strong, loud contributions to the debates of our parliament. And this woman never seeks any special recognition. She has silently, over the years, continued to contribute her quota despite her age. Let me invite a member of parliament, the Honorable Dr. Lahai, to, on behalf of the grateful people of Africa, to, on behalf of this parliament, move a motion for the recognition of this very special woman. Dr. Lahai, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, our distinguished guest on the high table, colleague, members of the Pan-African Parliament, colleague women of Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me join those that have spoken before me to wish all of us a happy Africa Day. But most importantly, as 2015 is dedicated to women of Africa, and this African Day celebration, the theme of which is women's development and empowerment. What better way to celebrate this day than honoring one of our own? A woman that has served this parliament diligently, a woman that has served her country diligently, one of the longest-serving parliamentarians in Sudan, with her political life starting in 1981, in the Council, Constituent Assembly, National Assembly, and now the Pan-African Parliament. This of our own woman of Africa started as a secondary school teacher, rose through the rank of inspector of schools, university lecturer, dean of faculty, vice chancellor of the university. She also ran as one of those women that sat on many boards, humanitarian boards, to ensure that women and children during war are protected and cared for, media board to ensure that the image of women in the media was positive, educational board to ensure that women's issues were at the fore of education. And in this parliament, one of the longest-serving members who have served under all the three presidents, she has, on many occasions, and practicalized what she has said by ensuring that she mobilized resources to train women in many African countries. Midwives, Sierra Leone was one of those beneficiaries. We sent 5 women from Sierra Leone to Sudan, together with other African countries, and they stayed there for 6 months and trained as midwives. And today, those women are helping Sierra Leone to reduce maternal and child mortality. working through the free health care initiative of our president. Honorable members, distinguished colleagues, our own Mama Africa is here with us this morning. I sometimes wonder at the exuberance of her energy, though she's 80 years. She's up early in the morning, and like all of us, rushes to the Pan-African Parliament, and she sits and listens. But when she takes the floor, we marvel at her energy and the passion with which she speaks for African independence, the passion with which she speaks for the judicious utilization and exploitation of Africa's resources. She speaks with Africa's independence, but most importantly, she speaks for the empowerment of women and girls and the liberation of women. No woman should die of giving birth. That is the message we get from her. Honorable members, distinguished guests, it is to this reason that I stand before you to give a notice of motion on the recognition and appreciation of Honorable Professor Suad Al-Badawi, for her achievements in women's empowerment in Africa. Noting that Honorable Professor Al-Badawi is an active member of this parliament since the establishment in 2004, promoting African values. Recognizing her role in women's liberation and education in Sudan and many neighboring countries for a period of more than 60 years. Commending her several initiatives in this parliament and in other organizations for the reduction of maternal and child mortality in Africa. Taking into consideration that Professor Suad Al-Badawi is currently over 80 years and is still working enthusiastically for the betterment of the lives of African women, I move that this House should express its recognition and appreciation of all these achievements. Thank you, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me, on your behalf, please be seated. Let me, on your behalf, invite the Honorable Professor Badawi to please step forward.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Pan-African Parliament, and as we celebrate Africa Day today, we would like to use the opportunity to honor a great woman of Africa who has contributed in numerous ways to the growth and development of our continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President Amadi. For what you have been doing, not only for me, but for Africa, for this Parliament. Thank you very much. What I have been doing through it is not 8, it is 83 now, is for Africa, and I promise you, until I die, I will not stop working for Africa. Africa now is emerging into a great power. Men, women, young people, and our future, all our future, our children. Take care of our children. Our children used to be named by Europe as street children. But now I say that these children are going to be the masters of the whole globe. I am sure of this. My brothers and sisters, I can see it. I can see it now that Africa, as long as there are men like Ahmadi, like most of the leaders of this world, not necessarily the presidents of Africa, but as long as there are people like this, and women like this, strong women, beautiful women, elegant women, who wants Africa to be leading. Please lead Africa. Africa now is being led by people, educated people, but some of them flee to Europe to find jobs. And here in Africa, all the wealth is in Africa. All the wealth is in Africa. That's why the West wants to evacuate us from Africa and come to Africa and live in Africa. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. And let people like Amadi and his beautiful wife, I am very... She is my friend. I cannot just leave this platform before saying one or two words about her. I'm sure that if every president has got a wife like this, Africa will rise. I'm sure. I want to say thank you very much. Thank you, my friend Gertrude. Thank you very much for what you have been doing for us. Thank you, the last, may his soul let peace in Idris. And finally, today, Amadi, bless you all. Should I say, my children, I think I can be a mother to every single one of you. I love you so much. I love you so much. You cannot imagine how much I love every single one of you. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Yes, I do. Come.
Thank you very much. After those emotional speeches, we'd like now to call on Honorable Fides Sinankwa, the first Vice President of the PAP Women's Caucus, to give a vote of thanks. Thank you. Can you give a big hand, please?
Son Excellence, Honorable Bethel Amadou,
Your Excellency, President of the Pan-African Parliament, and the President outgoing, President Mangela,
Son Excellence,
Your Excellency, Dr. Aisha, Commissioner of the African Union,
Dr. Thabo
Makube, the Archbishop of Cape Town and Metropolitan Anglican Church, honorable parliamentarians of Pan-African Parliament, the Mayor of the African continent, honorable former members of the Pan-African Parliament, and the Women Caucus, distinguished invitees for this African Day, in the name of Women Caucus at the Pan-African Parliament, and in my own name, in my capacity as a parliamentarian of the Burundi Parliament. Unfortunately, His Excellency said we would like to thank the involvement of all the African countries, especially the African Union, women who is involved in the development of Burundi. In the name of the Women Caucus, we would like to thank you for the interest and the commitment that you have always shown for the African society. Today, your presence on this celebration day witness that our year is dedicated for women and her development, for the development of Africa, and Africa which is an integrated, prosperous and peaceful, and directed by her own sons and on the international arena, and Africa which is growing and wishes to have a sustainable development using the African resources for the benefit of the African people. Regarding gender equality and the elaboration of a legal framework which have been elaborated, and the implementation of the actions is missing, as has been underlined by Mangala. This let us move from the theory to the practical. It is high time that we move from words to actions, and that women should be available and in all fields, and to have access to capital in order to increase productivity in the field of agriculture and food in particular. And all this cannot be achieved without the gender equality, and for the development of the whole continent. We solicit the African Union to have dedicated the 2015 Day for Women, considering the important role played by women in our society. And women emancipation is going to open the way for finding concrete solutions to the social economic problems. The world cannot achieve its objectives if half of its people are not in capacity to achieve their potential. It is the role of women, it is through women that we can guarantee the future of everyone, and through the social economic development for the 50 years to come, especially that we have a diversity of resources and the need of changing the mentality and culture be used as a factor of development and not an impediment. And for all these considerations, we would like to convey our deep thanks to all who contribute to the flourishing of women, to gender equality, and to the development of Africa with the presence of women. Our gratitude goes as well to every person that contributes in a way or another to the holding of this very important day. Long live peace and security in Africa. Long live the Pan-African Parliament, and long live the African Day. Let us contribute to the development of Africa thanks to the role of women. I would like to thank you in this connection.
Thank you very much, honorable guests and honorable invited guests and honorable members. We'd like to make some announcements. First, to indicate that this was the ceremonial part of this Africa Day celebration. So after the break, we'll resume at 11, and then there will be various panel discussions. Please, everybody, we urge you to come back and attend the discussions and participate. We would like to find out whether the following presenters are available. If they are, after the adjournment, if they could come forward. Ms. Dina Musinda Ruezo from Femnet, Open Society Southern Africa representative, and Mohamed Fadel Laili, and Mrs. Lita Ogana, Director of Gender. Those people to come forward. The next announcement is that the Committee on Cooperation will meet at 11 today in committee room number 1. And then, as we break, we shall have a group photo at the back, at the usual spot. So our invited guests are invited to come and take a group photo with the members. Also, in case of those people who will leave like the invited guests, we would like them to know that we have organized a gala dinner with cultural celebrations starting at 6:30 at Kyalami Theatre on the Track. So they are invited, if they go, and to come back in the evening. And that invitation extends to everybody. So now is the time for a tea break. Thank you very much, honorable members and invited guests. We shall have a group photo at the back, as I indicated, and we'll resume at 11. Thank you.
That's the Pan-African Parliament.